Listen up, gumshoes. You see those Bridgerton balls? The silk, the violins, the lingering glances? It's a lie. Behind the lace and the status, the Regency aristocracy was engaged in a high-stakes game of will this kill me before dessert. They weren't just eating, they were flirting with a slow, agonizing demise. Let's look at the evidence. If you've been watching Bridgerton and thinking, I'd give anything to live in 1813, I have one word for you. Don't. Or at least, don't eat the hors d'oeuvre. While the costumes are silk and the romance is spicy, the actual menu in a Regency ballroom was a biological crime scene that would make a modern health inspector faint on sight. I'm your historical detective, and today we're opening the cold cases of the Mayfair kitchens. We're counting down the 10 most disgusting, dangerous, and downright delusional delicacies the real-life Bridgertons were shoveling into their aristocratic faces. Forget the champagne and roses, we're talking about heavy metal poisoning, boiled anatomy, and whale secretions. This is the Gilded Gut, the Regency's most wanted foods. 10. The quivering ghost calf's foot. Jelly. We start our countdown with the centerpiece of every high society ball. You see those shimmering, translucent towers of amber jelly on the buffet? In a modern lens, that's Jell-O. In 1813, that is a feat of industrial-strength slaughterhouse chemistry. To make this delicacy, the kitchen staff had to take 4 severed calves' feet, hooves, hair, mud, and all, and boil them for 6 straight hours. The smell in the basement of a Mayfair mansion during Jelly Day was a sensory assault of wet dog and hot bone marrow. Once the collagen was rendered into a thick grayish glue, they had to clarify it. Since they didn't have high-tech filters, they used isinglass, which is a substance derived from the dried swim bladders of sturgeonfish. So, your elegant dessert was essentially a chemical marriage between a cow's foot and a fish's internal gas bag. To hide the taste of boiled farmyard, they drowned it in lemon, sugar, and massive amounts of sherry. It was served at every ball because it proved you had a staff patient enough to strain hoof juice through a dirty flannel bag until it looked like a gemstone. It's the original protein shake if your protein came from a trash heap and tasted like a drunken cow. Think a wobbly foot cake is bad? Just wait until you see what they did with the parts of the cow that usually stay on the inside. 9. The ribbed horror ox palates. Next on our list of culinary crimes is a dish that proves the Regency elite had a very loose definition of meat. We're talking about ox palates. If you're wondering what that is, run your tongue along the roof of your own mouth. See those ridges? Now imagine those, but 6 inches long, belonging to a cow, and stewed in a white sauce. In the 1810s, the palate was considered the refined part of the head. But the forensic reality was a nightmare. The palate is covered in hard, bony ridges called rugae. To make them edible, the cook had to rub them with salt and vinegar to scrub off the surface slime, then blanch them until the outer skin could be scraped away with a dull knife. The resulting texture was a mix between a rubber band and a wet sponge. It was often served in a ragout, alongside other unidentifiable bits. It was a status symbol because only the truly wealthy could afford the labor required to make a cow's mouth sealing look like a gourmet meal. It's the ultimate Regency flex, showing you're so rich you can afford to pay someone to spend 4 hours cleaning a bovine's dental architecture. But if chewing on a cow's mouth isn't sea-themed enough for you, our next entry brings a whole new meaning to the phrase ocean fresh. 8. The whale vomit, cocoa. Ambergris. Imagine the Duke of Hastings leans in for a smoldering whisper smelling of sandalwood and sperm whale bile? Welcome to the world of ambergris. This was the it ingredient for the Regency 1%. Ambergris is a waxy, flammable substance produced in the digestive system of sperm whales to protect their gut linings from the sharp, undigested beaks of giant squids. After the whale expels it, either through the mouth or the other end, it floats in the ocean for decades, aging in the salt and sun. When it's fresh, it smells like literal feces. But after 30 years of bobbing in the Atlantic, it develops a musky, earthy scent that the tune became obsessed with. They would grate this ancient, waxy whale gallstone into their chocolate pots and morning eggs. It gave the food a flavor that lingered on the tongue like a secret you wish you hadn't heard. You weren't just eating dessert, you were eating the pathological secretions of a giant sea mammal. It was a high society power move, I am so wealthy, I can afford to season my breakfast with the fossilized indigestion of a leviathan. From the depths of the ocean to the depths of the larder, let's look at the food that was literally designed to never, ever die. 7. The varnish brick, portable soup. Before there were bouillon cubes or canned broth, there was portable soup. Imagine taking a whole cow, boiling it down to a thick, black resin, and letting it dry until it had the consistency of a leather boot sole. That was the meat leather of the 1800s. In the Bridgerton-style kitchen, these slabs of beef glue were kept in the cupboard for years. When a quick gravy was needed for a midnight snack or a surprise guest, the cook would simply shave off a few curls of this dark, leathery resin into hot water. The problem? It often tasted like the glue used to bind books. Even worse, in the humid, soot-filled air of a London basement, these bricks often grew a fuzzy coat of mold. But the chefs just wiped it off and kept shaving. When you ate a rich beef ragout at a ball, there was a high chance you were consuming a rehydrated cocktail of every cow part imaginable, seasoned with a dash of whatever had crawled across the soup brick in the last 3 years. Think meat leather is a tough chew? Wait until you see why the bread in Mayfair was basically a home renovation project. 6. The drywall diet, adulterated bread. In the Regency era, bread wasn't just the staff of life, it was a weapon of mass destruction. To the 19th century elite, white bread was the only acceptable option. Brown bread was for the commoners. But because white flour was expensive, bakers became the ultimate con artists. To keep the loaves looking pure and white, they used alum, a harsh chemical compound used in tanning leather and making fire extinguishers. But that wasn't enough. To make the loaves heavier and more profitable, they extended the dough with chalk, magnesia, plaster of Paris, and even ground-up human or animal bones scavenged from local pits. When a debutante nibbled on a roll at a wedding breakfast, she was literally eating the walls of her own house. This led to a chronic state of internal inflammation and the London gut. Those tight corsets weren't just a fashion choice, they were holding in a digestive tract that was essentially being turned into drywall. Now, if the bread didn't kill your stomach, the fresh garden vegetables were ready to finish the job with a metallic twist. Buckle up, because we're crossing the halfway point of our culinary crime scene investigation. We've survived the bone bread and the whale vomit, but now we're entering the high-stakes chemistry phase of the Regency menu. If you thought the gossip in Lady Whistledown's column was toxic, wait until you see what they were doing to the garden peas. 5. The radioactive garden, copper-greened peas. In Mayfair, if your vegetables looked natural, you were basically a peasant. Real aristocrats wanted their greens to glow like a nuclear reactor. Here's the forensic reality. In the 1810s, fresh vegetables were boiled for an ungodly amount of time, usually 2 hours minimum. By the time a pea hit a silver platter, it was a sad, mushy, olive-drab pebble. But the tone demanded aesthetic perfection. They wanted their spring greens to look like literal emeralds. To achieve this, chefs turned to the dark arts of metallurgy. They would cook the vegetables in unlined copper pots. The acid in the greens would react with the metal, leaching out copper acetate and dyeing the food a brilliant, vibrant neon green. If the pot wasn't toxic enough, some helpful period cookbooks suggested dropping a copper penny or a brass thimble directly into the boiling water to fix the color. Every bite of those crisp green beans was a microdose of heavy metal poisoning. Over time, this led to the shakes, a permanent metallic taste in the mouth, and eventually liver failure. The vibrant green side dish was literally eating the diner's internal organs while they discussed the latest scandal at Almack's. Think a little copper poisoning is a fair price for a pretty plate? Our next entry takes us from the garden to the mouth of an alien parasite. 4. The sea monster pie, lamprey eel. Nothing says royal wedding quite like a giant, ornate crust filled with prehistoric bloodsuckers. Imagine a fish that has no jaw, but a circular, suction cup mouth filled with rows of razor-sharp teeth that it uses to latch onto other fish and drink their blood. That's the lamprey. It looks like a prop from a low-budget horror movie, but to the Regency elite, it was the ultimate gastronomic flex. These blood-sucking monsters were often imported at great expense and baked into massive, towering pies. The lampreys were stewed in a thick, black, iron-heavy sauce made from their own blood and fortified with port wine and spices like mace and cloves. The texture was oily, incredibly rich, and heavy enough to stop a heart mid-beat. In fact, death by a surfeit of lampreys was a legitimate historical concern. It was the ultimate adventure food for people who had run out of normal animals to conquer and decided to start eating the stuff of nightmares. From the bloodsuckers of the deep to the painter's palette of the dessert table, let's talk about the candy that could double as industrial primer. 3. The painter's dessert, red lead sweets. Sugar, spice, and everything. Used to paint the hull of a battleship? Those beautiful ruby red cherries on the cakes and the crimson-tinted sugar plums weren't dyed with strawberries or beets. That would be too logical and too expensive. To get that vivid, opaque scarlet that didn't fade under the heat of 1,000 ballroom candles, confectioners reached for the paint bucket. They used red lead tetroxide. Yes, the same stuff used to prime ironwork and prevent rust. They were essentially decorating their high tea treats with industrial-grade toxins. Because lead is a neurotoxin that builds up in the bones, the more festive the ball, the more brain-damaged the guests became. Symptoms included irritability, memory loss, and, fittingly for a Bridgerton drama, extreme mood swings. Those fainting spells in the garden? Half of them weren't from tight corsets. They were from the lead-laced macarons. If you think eating paint is a bold choice, wait until you see the anatomical garnishes that were considered the height of sophistication. 2. The erectile garnish, coxcombs. The only food that stares back at you with a serrated, fleshy grin. We've reached the runner-up of Regency madness, the coxcomb. This is the floppy, fleshy red crest on top of a rooster's head. In the 1810s, these were treated like truffles. They were the ultimate luxury garnish, meant to prove that you had killed 20 roosters just to decorate one single dish of stew. The forensic detail here is a nightmare. Coxcombs are highly vascularized, meaning they're full of tiny blood vessels and connective tissue. To make them gourmet, they were often soaked in acid until they turned a ghostly, translucent white, or left red for theatricality. The texture was described as gristly jelly. Imagine a plate of tiny, serrated tongues sliding down your throat in a bed of gravy. It was a texture so haunting it would stay with you longer than your wedding vows. And finally, we've arrived at the #1 spot. The dish that wasn't just disgusting, it was a literal high society assassination attempt. 1. The arsenic finale, Shields Green Blancmange. The most beautiful thing on the table was also the most successful assassin. The #1 craziest food of the Bridgerton era wasn't a weird animal part, it was the color green. In 1814, a pigment called Shields Green, cupric hydrogen arsenite, took the world by storm. It was vibrant, it was stunning, and it was made of arsenic. This wasn't just a paint, it was a lifestyle. It was in the wallpaper, the dresses, and most terrifyingly, the food. Confectioners used arsenic-based dyes to make vibrant green sugar leaves, jellies, and blancmanges. At a grand ball, a diamond of the season might break off a green sugar ornament from a centerpiece, unknowingly ingesting a lethal dose of poison. Even worse, when the arsenic-laced green wallpaper in the dining room got damp, it would grow mold that released arsine gas. You were eating arsenic, breathing arsenic, and wearing arsenic-dyed silk. The Bridgertons weren't just living a drama, they were living in a beautifully decorated gas chamber. It is the ultimate Regency paradox. The higher the status, the higher the arsenic count. The case is closed. The Regency era was a time of extreme beauty built on a foundation of extreme filth and chemical peril. The next time you see a Duke and Duchess dancing, just remember, they're probably one bite of a green cupcake away from a very colorful funeral. I'm your historical detective, and if you enjoyed this dive into the Gilded Gut, hit that subscribe button before the lead poisoning sets in. Want to see the autopsy report on 19th century makeup, where we investigate the lead-based face powder that literally ate the skin off debutantes' faces? Comment "Beauty is pain" below, and I'll open that file next. Let's face it, hounds. We love the lace, but we'd hate the lead poisoning. The diamond of the season wasn't sparkling because of her wit. She was likely glowing from the heavy metals in her peas. So, count your lucky stars. You live in an era where organic doesn't mean contains human bone ash. Stay smart, stay hungry for the truth, and stay far away from any jelly that looks back at you. We'll keep digging into the dirt so you don't have to eat it. See you in the next one.